the new Netflix prequel to Army of the Dead. Now, FYI, this is not directed by Zack Snyder. This is Zack Snyder conceptualized the story of this movie. He conceptualized the story of this movie alongside, if I can remember the name, if I can find the name over here of the screenwriter. I'm very bad here. Shay Hatton, the screenwriter and story credit on this with Snyder. Yeah, this is a prequel to Army of the Dead, which came out back in May, which feels like 10 years ago, and this movie, it's directed by Matisse Schweighöfer, who plays Ludwig Dieter in the Army of the Dead, and he reprises his role in this movie, but his character is named Sebastian. We kind of get his origin story of being a safe cracker extraordinaire before the zombie apocalypse that took place in Army of the Dead, before he linked up with Dave Bautista and that extremely huge crew that went in to try to break into the Vegas casino and steal that money. So this movie, it's no matter how much they try and make it to the detriment of the movie, it's not a zombie movie, it's a heist movie.
Yeah.
They try to make it like ham-fist zombies in here. We'll talk about that soon. But I guess initial thoughts with this movie, just right off the bat of Army of Thieves. Matisse Schweighöfer, man, he's something. He's something as a personality and a director. I'm going to say that right off the bat. He's go on.
No, I was going to say, like, because not even going on directing, the fact that he plays a character where his whole gimmick is screaming and being like weird and obnoxious to people didn't actually get obnoxious to me as a viewer says a lot. Like, it's just like, because Bosun, I remember as soon as he popped up in Army of the Dead, I'm like, all right, this dude's gonna be annoying, and he actually ended up being one of my favorite characters. And even here, so it was like, you know what, I'll definitely check out the prequel. I know a ton of people who haven't liked this movie or weren't even interested in it, were just like, well, it's the prequel that nobody asked for. It's like, sure, I didn't ask for it. True. But I'm glad I got it.
That's kind of how I feel. You know what I mean? It's not without its shortcomings, and its shortcomings are a little detrimental. It's hard to compare a movie that is not in line with the genre of the original movie, which is an odd occurrence to begin with. That's a rare occurrence kind of to begin with. But I don't think it's as good as Army of the Dead top to bottom. But I do think that it does a good job. And there's something to be said about Matisse Schweighöfer, in that he plays a character whose social awkwardness is on display constantly, but he's not obnoxious. He's relatively understated.
Yeah.
Rather, he's not annoying. And it's like, we've already spent over 2.5 hours with him essentially in Army of the Dead. We get another 2 hours here, and he's still very likable. Like, he's still a likable character. Who gets developed in this movie too. He makes YouTube videos that get less views than Sleepless, and he makes these videos of like cracking these saves and whatnot, and he gets recruited by Gwendolyn. Who's played by Nathalie Emanuel from F9, and she's in it, and she basically recruits him to her crew, which is comprised of Stuart Martin, who, let me tell you, Stuart Martin is asking to play Wolverine in an upcoming to-be greenlit streaming series. This guy is a spitting image of Wolverine, is he not, Stuart Martin?
If they, Marv, I'm telling you right now, because I know you're going to reboot the X-Men, but if you are looking for your next Wolverine and you want to, like, you don't want to choose somebody big because you don't want to anger people, like Chris Pratt being chosen as Garfield and Mario. If you want to choose somebody that's unknown, this is your guy.
This dude, and he's a good actor, but oh my God, like he's so much like Wolverine in this movie. Like, he even wears a wife beater. It's uncanny. Even in like the promotional stills of this, I was like, this guy looks just like Wolverine. And then there's Guz Khan, who plays the driver in this movie, Rolf. And then there's Rubio Faye, who I liked a lot as Karina, as sort of the spunky tech wizard of the group, of this heist crew, as they're trying to hack these 4 immaculate and like biblical safes throughout the movie. But the standout immediately is Matisse Schweighöfer. He does tremendous work here, behind the camera and in front of it. That's the main takeaway for me. What say you, Joe?
I have to agree. It's the fact that like this guy was like, hey, I want to make a prequel to just this character. I don't know if it's because he just fell in love with the character playing him or anything. I didn't read as to why this was made or how it came about, but Hell, I mean, yeah, if the guy really truly loved that character so much that he wanted to make an origin story for him, I'm all for it because direction wise, this reminded me so much of The Italian Job and why I like that movie a ton.
Yeah.
It's got a cool style to it. It's
The
fast.
remake.
Yeah,
The
yeah, the
remake.
remake. I should make that clear. Yeah, it's fast. It's upbeat. It's a little. It's got some quirkiness to it and everything. It's got some good comedy, and it has a crazy cool crew to hang out with. It reminds me so much of that, and I remember watching it when I was younger, loving it. Going back and watching it again, I still have like a very like fond memory, like a fondness for it and everything, and still enjoy it to this day as like not one of my favorite heist movies, but a fun popcorn one. And Army of Thieves is exactly that. It is a fun popcorn heist movie. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the zombie apocalypse that we saw in Army of the Dead. And as Steve hinted at earlier, yeah, whenever it is crammed in here, it feels really out of place, especially during Matthias's, or I should say Ludwig's, dream sequences, where like it's just like that's like really the only connection, and then literally like an epilogue that's literally the scene that he's introduced in Army of the Dead and played at the end of the movie. Um, Other than that, I mean, this is just a ton of fun. I had a lot of fun with this to where I hate to say it. Actually, no, I don't hate to say it, but it's just like, damn, Zack Snyder, you got a cool zombie verse on your hands. Don't mess it up.
Honestly, yeah, because we got Planet of the Dead coming next year, I believe. We got a
Yep.
TV series coming, so there's a lot to do with this
Apparently there's gonna be
series.
another spinoff of one other character. I forgot which one from the crew. I think it's either gonna be like the dude that had the buzzsaw or the gangsters that they like recruited last minute in the crew. It's one of those. There's a lot of people that want to do spin-offs with this universe, and it's just like, I mean, if you go back and watch our review, I think Steve, you were the most like well-rounded person when it came to the film. You very much enjoyed it, but even Dom and I, who were just like we had our criticisms with the film, we still said, hey, it was a ton of fun though. It's a fun zombie movie at the end of the day, and it's just like if you can keep making each movie better like this one and have a cool style to it, or even just do a whole different genre, I'm down.
Absolutely. And I think I've just been like, I I've been very critical of Zack Snyder for years. I'm not a fan of him as a director, but whenever he does zombies, he does them right,
Yeah.
and he's got an edge to him in that field, and it's funny. I wrote my review of Army of Thieves this afternoon, and I said in there, I said, who would have believed Zack Snyder kickstarted the next immense, immersive, spectacle-laden franchise in 2021, and it had absolutely nothing to do with Justice League. Yeah, and that's I think the kicker here too, because I don't know how the production of this came to be. I have a feeling that this and Army of the Dead were shot back to back, just given the close release date. I think these two were planned as sister movies
Probably,
anyway. Yeah, right out of the gate, because they're so close. I don't know which one was in production first. I would think Army of the Dead just because of the backing of Snyder and everybody, excuse me. But yeah, there's fun to be had in this thing. And yeah, it does have a very Italian Job quality to it. I actually just watched Italian Job for the first time this year as well, and I enjoyed that movie quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm glad we never got the Brazilian Job or whatever the hell they were planning to do with that sequel to that. That just never happened. But the thing is, though, with Army of Thieves, I did say, though, I don't think it's as good as Army of the Dead, in my personal opinion. And because there are some issues here that I do have with it. And there are some issues. And the one issue I have is that this movie's a prequel that's in love with the idea of being a prequel. And there's way too much foreshadowing. There's too much foreshadowing to the events.
There's literally a scene where a character is just like, maybe it's predicting your death. And it's just like, oh, get out of here. Come on.
There's too much on the nose callbacks, and I guess flash forwards, if you will, and for the chronology's sake. There's too many flash forwards and prophesizing about Army of the Dead here, and that's annoying, because it's like, if you're watching this movie, you more than likely, I would wager, more than likely have seen Army of the Dead. You know what's coming. What this movie really needed was a little bit of subtlety in that department. It needed like a background TV that nobody acknowledged but was in clear view that showed the zombie apocalypse happening. It didn't need Ludwig watching the TV in his apartment and then having a nightmare.
Yeah, several nightmares.
Several nightmares. It didn't need any of that. It didn't need any actual zombies in this movie, and I think that's what took me out of it in a way.
It did for me too, because the entire time I'm like, okay, so are they gonna actually show up in the movie? Like, is he gonna cross the path with somebody infected? Because they keep hammering it in, but no, it's just literally like, because we're a prequel. Like every single time you get one of those dream sequences, and God, I know we're talking about we're not talking about Zack Snyder, but Zack Snyder and anything dream sequence wise is always a bad mix. For me though, I agree with you on that, and I don't think it was as good as Army of the Dead. Because to me, I love the first half of this movie more than the second half. I feel like the second half starts to like get a bit, it starts to drag a bit, and like, you know, just the problems that occur throughout the movie, they get wrapped up like that by the end of the movie. And it was just like, that's it, that's how we're gonna solve all this. Like there's a big thing where it's just like literally the heist crew falls apart before the big and final heist, and it's just like, well, how are they gonna pull this off? And what they do is just like, oh, okay, that was easy. I mean, I guess you guys even need like 2 people in the first place or whatever. Like, it was just like, what's the point? Even like the conflict that is happening within the group to cause the breakup, I thought was just so childish. And I was just like, are you serious? Like, with the amount of money at hand here and at stake, like, this is what's gonna come in your way? All right, sure, whatever. Again, I had no problem with the performances of these guys, and I did like the characters. It's just like what the movie decided to do with them in the second half. I was just like, oh, okay, I'm not really enjoying this.
Yeah, it does kind of rely a little bit too much on cliches in that department too.
Absolutely.
The one thing that works better in its favor though than Army of the Dead is the concision. I don't think that's a word. The concise nature of the ensemble, which was one of the bigger issues with Army of the Dead, was that there was just too many characters.
Absolutely.
There was, that crew was like, what was it, a dozen? It was mob deep 13. In that movie. I was gonna say it was a baker's dozen. It was mob deep in that movie.
It was 12 people. No, it was 14. It was 12 people, and then they picked up 2 more people before they actually went in.
That was too damn many. And like, that movie was already long as is, and it didn't need that many characters. We're here. It's 4.
Yeah.
Am I right? Am I right on this? Five. Excuse me. I forget the driver. There's 5 here, and there's enough. They each get enough interplay. I think Rolf is probably, Guz Khan is probably the one who's shortchanged a little bit here, but they all feel pretty balanced, at least. Like, you come away, you're able to define them in about 3 sentences, which is more than you can say for the huge cast of Army of the Dead.
Yeah, literally, Army of the Dead was just, this dude's big and he's badass. This chick's big and she's badass. It was just like, that's half the roster of Army of the Dead is, they're badass.
No, honestly. So, like, the concise nature of the cast here allows everybody to shine. I really liked Ruby O'Fay. Mm-hmm. I think she was really good here. I think that she brought a little bit of spunk to her character that was maybe missing in some aspects too from Army of the Dead. I thought she brought kind of a good element of sass too, but she was still serious. And some of her line delivery too, like when her and Gwendolyn show up in Sebastian's basement. Some of her line delivery, I really enjoyed. Like, some of her, like, trying to play.
I don't know. It's been going on for too long now. I feel that was the comedy in this movie is really good. I would say that it's better than Army of the Dead's comedy.
The comedy's good. The comedy is very solid, and I think a lot of it is because a lot of it is so centered on Matisse Schweighöfer, who's got a really good sense of comic timing too.
Yeah,
like, you're not spending 2 hours with an insufferable character. You're spending 2 hours with a guy who's nebbish, but he's likable. He's not defined by his eccentricities to the point where he becomes a caricature of that sort of archetype.
Yeah,
he's very good here. I can't stress Schweighöfer enough.
I even felt like, again, like, to give him credit on his directing and like his performance, just knowing, hey, I gotta pull it back here. I feel like if this was your run in the mill, like the studio just wanted to get this out, that kind of character would have been screaming and hollering like we saw in like I'll just pull a film out of my hat real quick. Jumanji, like, you know how like Kevin Hart and Jack Black were. I know that if you go back to our history, I did enjoy Jumanji, but Steve didn't. But I did agree with Steve in regards that, yeah, no, those characters definitely were just loud mouth, like all that, like characters basically. From
And you see the shortcomings of something like that when you watch a movie like this.
absolutely,
That's
yeah.
that is occasionally manic. It's not entirely manic. You see that on display here in large quantities that I think elevates this movie and just makes it more enjoyable and more pleasant. It's not as obnoxious. And another detail that I liked in this too, and it's more prevalent in the first half than it is the second. I really like the CGI, the animation work they did with the safes. I like a lot of that. A lot of that was cool. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Hugo Cabret.
Okay.
You know, the Martin Scorsese movie Hugo, that was based off that book that was largely illustrations. I remember reading that book in school, like on my own volition. That was a huge book, but the bulk of it was like black and white sketches, like out of somebody's, notebook or composition book or something. It reminded me a lot of that and like Rube Goldberg. Just the twisting and like the inner workings of these like immaculate safes. I wish we kind of got more time. We get the prologue is excellent as it opens on Sebastian talking about the history of Hans Werner's safes and sort of the conception behind them and how they were modeled after a quartet of operas and whatnot. And I wish we got more time because there's a great scene. There's a great scene that's sadly shortchanged by sort of the stressful nature of the moment. And it's when when Sebastian's trying to crack a safe. I think it's the second safe. And Gwendolyn's like pressuring him and he's talking about it. He's saying it under pressure about how each of these safes had to do with love in some subtle way, the artwork around them. I wish we got more time to kind of look at that.
There's even a moment where he's just like, it just detected my presence. It's like, what the hell did that mean? Wait, hold on, go further into that. What do you mean?
Yeah, like I wish I wouldn't have mind that prologue be like 3 minutes longer just to kind of ham home that, because these safes are really works of art. Like they truly are. And I just find it funny too that like, and really creative, more so than funny. Like I find it just really creative that the safes themselves in a heist movie are characters.
No, yeah, it's just like, oh, what safe did you think was the coolest? The ones that had like 6 knobs on them and were coming in and out and everything.
Yeah, like all of them in their own way were interesting because we spend so much time that. And I can't speak German worth a damn over here, that Guten Dummerog or whatever it's called in the first movie in Army of the Dead, that like, that you're like, oh my God, there's more of these. And then there's like all these rumors and like that he goes into in the beginning, these fantastical legends that it's like, if you trip the combination lock too many times, the contents are incinerated and the safe will lock forever. I don't know. I found that fascinating. And it reminded me again, just the animatronic work or the animation work rather on these safes reminded me like a cross between Rube Goldberg and Hugo Cabret and just weird mechanical. I don't know thing one about engineering, but these things were pretty cool.
I got nothing to add to that if you were waiting for me. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries.
I was just going through my phone for notes and everything. Like,
I say the other critique that I have with this movie, though, is that, like, I think distracting is the character's desire to make, like, external references to heist movie cliches while abiding by those tropes. And here's something that irritates me. I don't think I've ever talked about this on the radio show or the web show, but I'll say this. It's one, it might even be my ultimate pet peeve in a movie. And I don't like to play CinemaSins over here. We have a checkered history with that as is. I don't like to play that. But you know what the one trope that I absolutely hate in movies and TV shows is when some character, and they do this multiple times here. They do this to the point of annoyance. I hate in movies and TV shows when a character has to say something like, this isn't a movie, this is real life, or this only happens in movies. I hate that shit.
Well, maybe you're the action hero or the action or the villain. It's just like, all right.
I hate that shit with a burning passion. I would rather the character look at the camera. Yeah. I would rather them look at the camera and acknowledge me versus try to play it off like this isn't a movie. And they do that multiple times. There's a line in here when they introduce the crew, and Sebastian says, "Are we like those crews in a movie film?" He actually says movie film as if he's Borat. Are we like those crews in a movie film where each one of us has a different skill set? Please,
dude.
please.
No, when he said that, I'm like, okay, all right, come on, man. Like,
that's his biggest sin in the whole movie.
I get it. It's a heist movie. I get it. It's
that part, I found those tropes to be brutal. And it would be one thing if it was a one-off thing. This happens a handful of times.
No, it does. And I feel like it's because, like, the movie, like, to its fault, it has that style of being like, see, we know what we are. We're fun and cool. Like, because, like, when they introduce the characters, they get the Suicide Squad, like, title cards and everything. And even one guy's name is Brad Cage because he grew up watching Brad Pitt movies and Nicolas Cage action movies. To where it's just like that's cool, that's funny visually, but when you start saying it out loud, you realize how kind of dumb it sounds coming out of a person's mouth rather than like seeing it with your eyes.
It's very true that some things play better on paper than they do on screen, and that's one of those things. That's one of those elements that, like, I think I compare it, and again, music, I don't talk a lot about it because it doesn't come up. Like, music is probably my second love to movies. And again, I work on a country radio station. So I'm always hearing lyrics, and I'm always like seeing and hearing patterns in music. And it's like in music when they reference other songs.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I hate that. Country music, and I don't want to go on a sidebar here. Country music does that to an annoying level of referential just callbacks that I can't stand, because it's like it's almost becomes like a screenwriter challenge then to incorporate references instead of just being its own thing and blazing its own trail. And that to me feels unfathomably lazy. And that stuck in my craw, along with the fact that this movie's very infatuated with itself on being a prequel.
No, I agree. Do you have anything else you want to say onto it? Because I mean, like, I got nothing else other than, like, again, like, I thought the second half wasn't as good. I actually think the climax to this movie too, in terms of, like, you know, when everything's supposed to be at stake, it's pretty just standard. Oh, you know what? Actually, I thought because this is a thing. Hold on, let me make sure I got this right. Yeah. In every one of these heist movies, The Town, all of these big movies, you always have the, you know, Interpol agent or the police, FBI, CIA. You have the agent that is like their adversary that they're eventually going to cross paths in the final, like, climax. I actually thought that character was kind of annoying.
And I don't feel like the villains here, and I feel like it's because the crew in their own way is so dishonest with one another and so slithery with each other that, like, it almost didn't need. I mean, yeah, you're cracking safes, you're stealing millions of dollars. There's going to be somebody coming after you sooner or later. But, like, the villains didn't add the sense of urgency you come to expect with these heist movies.
No,
if we're going back to
all.
the Italian Job, if we're using that as the baseline, which is a very good example, I'm glad you brought that up. Like, if we're going back to the Italian Job as the baseline, there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of being caught, and there's a sense of stakes here.
Yeah.
The sense of urgency just comes from the fact that, like, this crew is so ragtag, oddball, and untrustworthy in and of themselves that you're waiting for them to break versus the Interpol agent to catch up with them. There and much more time is spent on the crew than the villains, obviously. But the villains don't bring their own urgency here either.
And it's just like the way, like, you know, it's like, when you look at these Interpol or CIA agents in these other bank movies, is like they're equally as smart. They know how to stay ahead. They can spot everything out. And, like, okay, maybe you wanted to avoid that cliche, of course, like, you know, he goes, but it's just like, then you ran into this, that, like, this is going to be the guy that's going to stop the crew, and he's a bumbling idiot sometimes.
Facts. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We can go into star rating here. I enjoyed it for the most part, but there's those three things between the prequel the prequelitis almost. I guess I'll call it
No, you're absolutely right.
the incessant need to affirm the fact that this is a prequel, insofar trying to make this a zombie
Yeah.
movie in some aspect, that was a turnoff. The constant referential nature of this movie and like reminding us that, oh, it's not a movie, it's high stakes and everything, that drove me a little nuts. And then the villains adding a lack of urgency too. It's enough to drag it down to 2.5 stars for
Absolutely.
me. That's enough to drag it down 2.5 stars. But I'll say this: if you liked Army of the Dead, I don't know if it's required viewing for this sort of series, like speaking just in this universe or whatever. But I do think there's worse ways you could spend 2 hours of your time than with Matisse Schweighöfer, who really dominates this movie, deservedly so. There's enough development here, and there's enough care and attention to his character and sort of the crew that makes up this movie, that it is worth watching. It's enjoyable more often than it's not, but it is brought down by some serious hindrances throughout. It's 2.5 stars for me out of 4. But I look forward. I think we're going to get the animated series before we get Planet of the Dead. I think. Yeah, I think that's coming in the spring. So I'll look forward to that. And I'll look forward to Planet of the Dead. This series has me sold. I will follow this.
If this is the lowest this series can ever be, or has been so far, that's way better than the start of. I'm not gonna say it's Snyder's universe, but it's way better than the start of what he was trying to do last time with Warner Bros. Now, whether that's Warner Bros.'s fault or his fault, I don't know.
The product's out there, though.
Yeah, the product's out there. Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman don't come near close to the amount of fun and a great start to a universe that I had with Army of the Dead and Army of Thieves. This is a good start to a universe. I very much enjoyed it. I have the same criticisms as Steve. And yeah, is it a required viewing if you saw Army of the Dead? No, but if you like that character, if you enjoyed like being in that world almost, it is cool to see a little bit of the start of the zombie apocalypse for how much it's crowbarred in here. It's funny to see people just kind of look at the newscast and go, okay, zombies exist, so what? And it's just like, and we know where it's going to eventually lead to. That being said, like I'm in the same ballpark as Steve. It is 2.5 out of 4 stars for me. I'm excited to see what comes next with the franchise, both in the animated series, the sequel, Planet of the Dead, and if there's ever anything else that they want to do, any other spin-offs, or if they make it a trilogy with like, I don't know, Universe of the Dead. I don't know. I got no idea. Or
Galaxy of the Dead.
Galaxy of the Dead. I'm looking forward to it. Zach, you got something good on your hands, man. I hope you do great with it because you deserve it after what happened with Warner Bros.
What's your star rating?
2.5, same as you.
2.5. Yeah, I'm interested. I'm sold. And the other thing too is I think Netflix really, just to wrap things up with Army of the Dead, or Army of Thieves rather, I think that Netflix allowed him a lot of creativity and a lot of creative liberty, and it shows that
there's some like European like feeling to this filmmaking. I haven't seen too many European movies other than like Italian films like Cinema Paradiso and stuff. But it's just like there was something about his filmmaking. I'm like, man, it reminds me when I watched like foreign films from Europe. Like just like the music choice, also the editing. It reminded me very much of that.
Yeah, for the better. Yeah, I do enjoy this one. I do think there's a lot to offer with this series. I'm excited for the series, which I guess is going to be done in an anime style too. Mm-hmm. We'll probably review the pilot. I can see us reviewing the pilot next year.
Sure.
And the series. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't even know if that's even been confirmed, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to Planet of the Dead. And that's a hard title to say, Planet of the Dead.